Hello and welcome. This is a short informational video about a topic that I'm very passionate about. If you like learning about communication and interpersonal relationships, I think you will find it useful. This video is being created as part of a class in the Provincial Instructor Diploma program offered through Vancouver Community College. We all make assumptions on a fairly regular basis. It is part of how we operate in the world. Assumptions are based on our ability to infer. We see, hear, or smell something, and then draw a conclusion about it. And lots of times, our assumptions are correct. But as you probably know, sometimes our inferences lead us to make assumptions that are incorrect. And these can be dangerous for interpersonal relationships. Chris Argelis came up with what I think is a super useful metaphor for explaining how it is that we make assumptions. He called it the ladder of inference. The ladder has 6 rungs on it, and as you take in information, you climb the ladder. The first rung is observable data. So this is the stuff that you see, hear, smell, and notice about your surroundings. For example, let's pretend you're in a staff meeting and you notice that one of your employees, George, is staring off into another room when you're presenting new ideas. So you move up the ladder to the second rung, which is the selected data. So you can't take in all the data that you observe. So instead, you make selections. So in our example, you come away from the meeting only remembering that George wasn't paying attention, and you miss the fact that he stuck around after the meeting to chat with his colleagues about the new ideas presented. This causes you to make assumptions. You start to add meaning to what you have observed. So you may start to think that George isn't interested in new ideas, and he's bored of his job. These kinds of assumptions we make all the time without even noticing. We can be 3 steps up the ladder and don't even notice that we're climbing. As we continue up the ladder, we start to draw conclusions. We might put a couple of different assumptions together and decide that from what we've noticed of George, he thinks that we're underqualified for a job and he wishes that he had got the promotion instead. You decide he's probably disengaged from work. Now we start to get into a dangerous area where we start to adopt beliefs about what's going on. Beliefs are the things we think about, so we might take our conclusions and turn them into beliefs. This might make us start to believe that George doesn't even like our ideas, and that he thinks we are incompetent. You might start to believe that George is jealous of you. One of the problems with beliefs that are founded in assumptions is that they will change how we select our data. It's a cycle, like the red arrow is showing. Because we believe George is not interested, we start to only notice times when he's not actively engaged in our ideas. We ignore the other data and continue to climb our ladder. And we can go higher up on our ladder than just having beliefs. We move into the realm of taking action. So because we believe that George doesn't like our ideas, we stop sharing with him and asking him for input. When we get this high up the ladder, it's hard to see the ground and remember where we came from. We might not even remember what facts caused us to come to the beliefs that we have. Taking action can also become a bit of a cycle, where we act in a certain way that creates situations to observe more data that reinforces our belief. So because we believed that George is disinterested, we stopped giving him opportunities to contribute, and thus we find more opportunities where he seems disengaged. Now, we've created a pretty strong opinion of our employee based on very little facts. So, what is important is learning how to climb back down the ladder. And there are a few ways to do this, and both involve recognizing the fact that we've climbed our ladder and made all these assumptions. Self-awareness is key. When you start to notice yourself climbing the ladder and making assumptions, you can ask yourself a simple question. What else could be going on? So, when I'm thinking about George, I think, well, maybe he's the kind of person who has a hard time focusing on presentations. Or maybe he had a really late night last night and is trying his hardest just to stay awake. The other important thing to do is check in with the other person. This isn't always easy, and it isn't always appropriate. However, when I start to notice myself making assumptions, I think it's only fair to let the other person know what's going on for me. Good communication solves so many problems. So I might ask George how he's doing, or what he thought of the ideas presented. If this is a frequent occurrence, I might be a bit more direct and let him know what I observed. The important part is to start with my observations and not my assumptions. If I tell George that he seems bored or not interested in new ideas, he's likely to get defensive. But if I let George know that I'm curious as to how he found the presentation, he's more likely to share what's really going on. Of course, I also need to be open to his feedback. If he was bored, I need to be okay with that answer. The idea is to start making your ladder more visible to the other person. I like to think of each person in a relationship as an iceberg. So the behaviors that we see is only a fraction of what's actually going on for that person. They may be having a bad day, or might have a totally different style than we are used to. At the same time, they can only see the tip of our iceberg. It's only when we inquire that we find out more details about what's really going on for another person. And remember, you may be climbing your ladder, and they may be climbing theirs. The importance is to be aware of your ladder and how you got to where you did. And more importantly, what you need to do to get down the ladder to where you can have meaningful conversations that are based on truths and facts, rather than operating on your assumptions. I know that this was a really quick introduction to a kind of complicated idea, but I hope that others can reflect on this and think about how it can be useful as they move forward in their conversations and interpersonal relationships.